If you have a negative view of God the Father, and many do, I invite you to read this parable again that we heard from in the gospel. If you have a distorted view of the Father, I invite you to read this parable again. This story from the Gospel of Luke starts out with Jesus being critiqued by the scribes and Pharisees, the so-called righteous ones, self-righteous ones. And they said, this man eats with sinners. He welcomes them and he eats with them. He socializes with them. These are tax collectors and other sinners. Jesus hears them. So he tells this parable, this story with a moral meaning. Talks about this father who has this son who goes out and spends this money, his inheritance. We see a different image of the Father in this gospel than maybe we have in our own mind of God the Father. Why? Well, so many of us have what's called the father wound. We had a less than perfect father. Maybe we can see some of his good aspects, but maybe some of those other aspects are not as good. And maybe we come from a family culture where we just don't talk about this, or we turned a blind eye to it, or maybe dad's friends covered for him and say, what's your problem? Your dad is the greatest guy in the world. Yeah, you don't live with him. We take that image of our earthly father oftentimes to God the Father. Maybe our earthly father was abusive. Maybe he was drunk. I had a flashback thinking about my own dad. Thankfully, he got sober and life did change for him. And he became the kind of father that I think God meant for him to be and the kind of grandfather God meant for him to be. But when he was drinking, it was bad. I know many of you that are in my age group remember when we had the rains and the river that flowed. McClintock Road, was washed away. Rural Road was washed away. The bridges were washed away. The only way to get across the river was Mill Avenue and the I-17 bridge in Central. And then the I-17 bridge started having problems. The water got under the supports and it started to sag, so they closed that bridge. At that time in my house, we were on the north side of the river, and they were flying over in helicopters saying that we needed to evacuate. My dad was plastered, and he was in a rage. I remember he pushed my mom. Maybe your dad hit your mom. Maybe your dad was physically abusive to you. Maybe he was arrogant, condescending. Maybe he held forgiveness over your head, saying, no, I'll forgive you of this, but anytime you mess up, I'm going to put it right in your face. Maybe he was just absent altogether. Some kids from fatherless families say that they almost envy the kids that were from abusive families because they said, at least your dad was there. Mine wasn't. It was empty. We take this image oftentimes of our Father to God the Father. But Jesus shows us something different. We remember when Philip speaks to him and says, Lord, just show us the Father and that will be enough. And he says, Philip, don't you get it? He who has seen me has seen the Father. So all that stuff we put on the Father, oh, he's going to pounce on me when I make a mistake. And he's critical of me if I don't do this or I don't do that. And he's just waiting for me to be like, okay, see, look what you did. How foolish are you? How stupid are you? No, Jesus shows us something different. This father has these two sons. One son stays home, faithful in a sense. The other one's like, give me my inheritance. Now, it wasn't split evenly in the time of Jesus. One son would get 2/3, the oldest, and the other would get 1/3. The younger would get the 1/3. And so this son says, I wish you were dead so I'd get my inheritance, but you're not, so give it to me anyway. I got to get out of here. And the father, he doesn't say anything like, well, you're going to be sorry. He's like, all right. He gives him his share, and he goes off. Free will. He spends it with abandon, and it's gone. Partying, doing whatever else he does. Winds up broke in a foreign place. Really no way to get home, essentially. And he's relegated to feeding the swine. He has to get a job. And they say, well, you can feed the pigs. Now, this is shameful for a Jew. This is like the worst thing that could happen, because pigs are considered unclean. You don't touch a pig, you don't raise a pig, you don't feed a pig. You stay away from the pigs because they're pigs. And here he is, feeding the pigs. It's gotten that bad. And he's obviously supervised and getting some sort of compensation, but the food that he's eating must be less than what the pigs are eating, because he wanted to eat what the pigs were eating. Can you imagine it getting that bad? And it says he comes to his senses. He has an awakening. And he says, I really messed up. But even the servants, even the slaves in my father's house have enough to eat. I'm going to go back to my father, and I'm going to plead for him to allow me to just work in the household. I'm not fit to be called his son. I squandered his inheritance, but I'm going to go back. See the father. Now, we call this the parable of the prodigal son, but the father is the heroic figure here. So the father's there. He's standing outside. He's looking down the road. Why? He doesn't have to do that. He's a wealthy man. He's looking down the road, and he sees his son way off in the distance. He's coming home. His heart is touched. This is not dignified posture for a stately man who is wealthy. He runs out there to him. Runs to his son. The Greek of the New Testament says he throws himself around the neck of his son, kisses him tenderly, and the son begins his speech, his rehearsed speech. Father, I have sinned against you and against God. I no longer deserve to be called your son. Put me in your house as a slave or a day laborer. That will be enough. Like a Jewish father, shut up already. Bring him a robe, a royal robe. Here he is, he's probably covered in pig dung. Bring him a robe. Put shoes on his feet. See, in those times, the slaves and the hired workers did not have shoes. Only the family members had the shoes. Put the shoes on his feet, because now he's walking in the right direction. And put that ring on his finger. All this dignity is restored. The ring from a king was often a signet ring. It had the family crest. And when you sealed the document with wax, you would press that into the wax. It would form the image of the family seal. When we are confirmed, we hear, be sealed with the gift of the Holy Spirit. That's sealed with the mark of God, with the mark of the Father. They take him home. Kill the fatted calf. Oh, that makes me hungry. Prime rib. Wow, fresh. Dancing and singing going on. The older brother comes home. Asks the servant, what's going on? I've been out there in the field working. He's doing the work of a good son. Your brother has come home, and your father has killed the fattened calf, and he is happy and joyful, and people are singing and dancing. Oh, the other son. He is probably more of the image of the Father that we carry and we place on God the Father. Vindictive, revengeful, angry, resentful. He's like, what? That bum took off. He took a third of the estate, blew it, and now he's back and Dad's happy. Where's the justice in that? Wouldn't go in. Dad comes out. Again, the father. Son, what's up? Look at what you did. It's funny how they both refer to him as your brother and your son. Do you do that with your family members when you have a brother or sister that's not doing what they should, and you call up your other sibling and say, guess what your brother is doing now? Guess what your sister put up on Facebook? Do you do that? You haven't even given me a goat to feast on with my buddies. Look what you did for this loser. He swallowed up your property with sordid women. That was really said in the gospel, so you wonder if he was keeping tabs on his brother. Kind of like we do on Facebook. What are they doing now? Oh, goodness. Here, sometimes we just need to click out and just, you know what? I don't need to see this. I don't need to see this. Maybe keeping tabs on his brother, finding out what's going on in that distant land. Son, you have been with me all this time, and you don't understand the dignity that you have before me. See, the father is right in saying, everything I have is yours. 2/3 of the estate, which is all that's left now, is his. He can ask it of his father at any time. Just ask, and I will retire, and you have the 2/3. Everything I have is yours. But we must celebrate. Your brother was dead, and now is alive. He was lost, and now he's found. This is the image of the Father, the true image of the Father that needs to erase, that needs to modify, that needs to augment whatever distorted image we have of God the Father, being vindictive, angry, absent, forgetful, drunk, whatever it is, not loving, uncaring, emotionally disconnected, all those things that we put on God the Father because of our father wound, our earthly father. See, we have a Father that loves us so much that he sent his Son. We hear in the first reading that when the ancient Israelites approached the perimeter of the Holy Land and ate of the fruit of the land, the manna ceased that had rained down on them for 40 years in the desert. We have a Father that loves us so much that he sent his Son to reestablish that manna that rains down from heaven right here on this altar. That's how much he loves us. Friends, if you have a distorted image of God the Father, read this parable. If you have a tweaked idea of who God the Father is, read this parable. Read it again and again and again.